Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. I'm Anne-Marie from brambleberry.com and I'm here to show you a really cool recipe. I'm very excited about this cold process recipe, although I will say it's a bit of an advanced recipe because of the ingredients we used. Not the technique, but the ingredients. So if you've never made cold process soap before, this is not the first one to start out on actually. You probably want a good 5 to 10 recipes under your belt before you start with this one. The reason for that is we used a full 7% beeswax in this recipe and a little bit of bee pollen powder. So when you use both of them in the same recipe, what happens? Well, bee pollen with the naturally occurring sugars can heat up the soap a little bit because of the sugars. It's the same thing with like fruit juices or honeys. So you have that. And then we're using 7% beeswax, which is a ton of beeswax. So you have to soap it at higher temperatures, so that's one thing. And then the soap holds on to those temperatures for longer, which can cause all kinds of issues. Everything from soap volcanoes, which we'll talk about, to just kind of uneven gel phase, to really having to be babying your more delicate oils or your more delicate ingredients. The recipe uses Brambleberry's brand new Raw Honeycomb Fragrance, which isn't as sweet as you would think. It's got some notes of smoke, it's got some notes of cream in it, and it's got some notes of amber. Really, this smells a lot like, well, what I imagine a honeycomb actually smells like, and it is fantastic in cold process soap. You'll notice this color, it's a beautiful creamy color, really not a lot of discoloration going on in it. One note, when you cut these bars the very first few days, you might not smell this fragrance nearly as much. The beeswax and the bee pollen, something about the combination sort of minimizes the fragrance. I promise you, the fragrance comes back after a few days. This recipe is palm-free. It's a really interesting mixture of butters and some exotic oils. I love soaping with borage oil. I hope if you've never soaped with it before, you're gonna notice the difference in your final bars. So let's talk about temperatures for just a minute. Now, soap making temperatures are total personal preference. If you ask 10 different soap makers what they like to soap at, you'll get 10 different answers. Now, I like to soap at the 120 to 130 range. This particular batch of oils with the wax inside of it already is at 114. Clearly, this is too cool. You can tell it's too cool because A, you can't see through it, and B, if you've made soap before, you know exactly what's gonna happen when I add my lye to this. It's gonna turn into soap on a stick because the beeswax is basically already hard in there and it's just being suspended, right? Because the beeswax melt point is about 145. So I need to get this entire mixture up a little higher. So I'm gonna soap this between 130 and 140. So this is just going in the microwave for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, just to get it back to a consistency that I'm gonna be able to work with. But you don't want to get it too hot, because what happens when you get it too hot? You will actually get a soap volcano. This is where the soap superheats up in your mold. And you guys, this happened on accident. We were just testing this recipe just to see kind of how we liked the 7% beeswax, to see how we liked the combination of things. And the entire thing started to overheat and go into huge gel phase right in front of us. And so we have a little bit of grainy iPhone video to show you, but this is why it's so important that we manage our temperatures in this recipe. Now, you guys, this soap is actually just fine. It basically went through hot process in the mold, really, when it comes right down to it. I'm really curious to see what it looks like on the inside, but it is a little bit dangerous, right? You don't want soap spewing out anywhere, and so it's really important that you watch your temperatures. So that's one of the reasons why I'm making sure to really keep this at 130 to 140. I'm gonna put my soap in the freezer after I make it today to also keep that in there. Just a note about the design and a little talk about the lather. Because of the beeswax in there and because of the fact we aren't using any POM, which is a secondary lathering agent, this lather is a little bit smaller, a little bit denser, but very rich. I think you're gonna be really pleased at how it turns out because it's sort of a break all the rules kind of soap. And about the design, we got this design with just a fork and just normal bubble wrap to kind of mimic what a honeycomb actually looks like. So now I'm gonna suit up for safety. While I'm doing that, I'm just gonna pop these oils into the microwave, probably a 30-second burst, because remember, I really wanna monitor my temperatures and make sure I'm between 130 and 140. I'm just gonna add my bee pollen now, and I'm adding it directly into my oil so that way it gets evenly dispersed. You'll notice it has a little bit of graininess to it, and that is gonna add a little bit to a cool looking texture, but more importantly, also a nice yellow in our soap. So now it's time to add my lye. And another thing that makes this recipe a little different than normal recipes is I'm gonna actually whisk in my lye. And the reason I'm whisking it in is because I don't want that entire chemical reaction to happen too quickly. Because if it does, I end up with soap on a stick / soap just stuck in my bowl. So once this is fully whisked in slowly and carefully, then I'll be able to stick blend it to get it to the trace I want it at. But if you just stick blend to start with, the trace gets a little too thick too fast. So if I was to keep doing this for a couple hours, this would actually turn into soap just fine. In fact, my first 5 batches of soap, I hand stirred myself. But it takes a while. Basically, a stick blender is like a whisk on steroids. So I'm gonna whisk my fragrance in, then I'm gonna get to the trace that I want with the stick blender. So I'm just whisking that fragrance oil in. So again, really treating this like the fast moving recipe it is. I'm going to also, before I get my stick blender, I'm gonna make sure my mold is close to me and that I have my herbs at close hand, because part of soap making that makes it successful is that preparation piece. You can see this is starting to get a little hard already, and that's just our beeswax starting to harden right there. And burp the stick blender. It's especially important because this is already pretty thick. So this is a pretty good trace. I would say it's kind of a medium, thick medium trace. I want it pourable though, because I need to push my bubble wrap down into the mold to get that design. It looks so creamy and so pretty. I love freshly made soap. Gorgeous. I like to drag the tines all the way across before I put in my design. And that gives a little bit of buildup on this side for our cornflowers. Also keep this handy, because if you end up letting the soap build up inside your fork, you end up with more of a spatula as opposed to a fork design, which is fine, just not quite the look I was going for this. You'll notice this has really hardened up quickly and is keeping the design beautifully. That's that beeswax. Now it's time to put our honeycomb in and just gently lay it down. And this is just bubble wrap, but you want to get it in there pretty firmly. So, and you got to displace all those tines anyway. So just kind of shove it in there and get it in there firmly. But I don't want to forget those cornflower petals. They are an essential part of this design element. Just a tiny little bit, and I will press them in. And they're decorative, but they're really pretty. And yes, they will come off the first or second time you use it. I don't care, because I think they look so great in contrast to the natural yellowness of this soap, thanks to the beeswax and the bee pollen and our oil choices. So I did make this a few days earlier, and I did put it directly into the freezer. So I'm really excited to see if it went through any gel phase at all, partial gel phase. All of those ingredients really do kind of hold on to heat. First thing I'm gonna do, just gonna gently peel off this really cool bubble wrap. I love the design we got out of here. It looks perfect. With the Brambleberry silicone molds, you just gently peel away from the sides, and all that beeswax in there should make unmolding a breeze. And then we push out, and since we have the herbs, since we have the herbs on here, I'm also gonna probably try and cut from the side so I don't end up dragging these petals down the side of the soap. So here we have, and I'm just gonna look here on the bottom. I'm not seeing any telltale kind of circular gel phase here. I'm gonna put this here. And if we're gonna get gel phase, it's gonna be right in the middle. I'm just gonna cut from the side here. And notice I've got my flowers down at the bottom so they don't make drag marks. And let's see. Oh, I do see it right there. So we've got gel phase going right in there. Do you see how it's kind of a little bit darker That's gel phase. And so that means in the middle, it's actually gonna be probably all the way out. So even though I put this in the freezer, it still went through gel phase. Now, I think it's important to keep the temperatures on this one pretty low. So I would recommend the refrigerator or freezer right away so we don't get any volcanoes. We don't want this to get too hot, but it didn't end up preventing that partial gel phase. So because this gels so easily, you do have a couple options. One, you could just let this sit on the counter and go through full normal gel phase so that you ensure that this gel phase kind of circle, this ring, goes all the way through your entire bar of soap. You can do that, or you can soap at lower temperatures, right? So we're at between 130 and 140 for this. You could try and get even a little bit lower and stick it in the freezer and hope that that stopped the gel phase. Now, I personally don't mind this look at all. It's an aesthetic thing, and this is an all natural soap, and anybody that you give it to, anybody that buys it from you is never gonna look at this and go like, oh, that's a partial gel phase. It's just me and you that know. So it doesn't matter either way. This is still amazing soap, no matter what, if it went through gel phase or not. So this is a fun example. This is gel phase that went further out to the edges, right? So this is almost went all the way out to the edges. And also, just want to point out this line here. That's because the petal got dragged all the way down, which is why on this I have the petals all the way here, and I'm hand cutting instead of using the wire cutters because I don't want my petals to get dragged down. It looks totally fine. It's soap. It's great soap no matter what. It's just an aesthetic thing. So this is the soap that you just watched me make, only it's a week later. And I really wanted to see what the soap would do with me just putting it directly on the counter instead of putting it in the freezer. Now, I'm filming this in summer in Bellingham, Washington in a non-air conditioned office. So it's about 70 degrees outside. It's not that warm in here, but I just went ahead and put this on the counter because I was really curious if I could get maybe a full gel phase out of it. So let's see, I'm gonna carefully get this out. Love the Brambleberry silicone molds. They come out beautifully. I can see, I love how this looks already. So the first thing I'm gonna do is peel off my texture mat, AKA my bubble wrap. That looks perfect. This smells amazing. You'll notice I have the herbs on the bottom here. And the reason I have that is so that this doesn't drag all the way down. Because if I have it on this side, those beautiful flowers will make drag marks in the soap. So now I'm just going to push down gently with my non-serrated knife and see what we've got. And ooh, looks like a beautiful, perfect, even gel phase, at least on that first cut. I've got a few flowers here, so I'm just gonna get them right off because again, those flowers would make drag marks, which isn't that big of a deal. It's just soap, but aesthetically, I think it would look much prettier without those drag marks. So, this is beautiful. That gel phase went all the way to the corners. So maybe what the key was here was not sticking it in the freezer because that retarded the gel phase, but not quite enough. So I got a partial gel phase. And again, gel phase is one of those kind of personal preference things. It's not necessary to make a great bar of soap, but it does add to the evenness of the texture. And you'll notice that soap that goes through a full gel phase gets harder faster. It's because it got hotter and evaporated out more of its liquids. This is gorgeous. I love how this looks. I'm gonna keep cutting these, but you guys, if you liked this video, hit the thumbs up button, please, and subscribe to the channel as well. And when you're out on social media, please hashtag your creations, this or anything else you're making with Bramble on, because I love to see what you make, the community loves to see what you make, and you inspire each and every one of us when you show us what you're making with our products. Until next time, you guys, keep being creative. Bye.